at Konradzki Celej, and the whole discussion will be moderated by Enis Huli, General Partner at 500 Istanbul. Guys, welcome on the stage.
Perfect stuff. Natalia, how are you? Ladies first, how's life?
Good, busy. And fighting. You see Ukraine fighting.
We were gonna get to that later.
You ask me how I am?
Yeah, sure. For the audience to know you better, can you please briefly give your background, what do you do, etc.?
Yeah, sure. So I used to work at Morgan Stanley till 2009, and after that I've been running my own finance-related companies in London. So in 2018, I launched my family office after running my 2 investment banking companies, which I exited successfully.
Rafael, and a bit about yourself. What do you do?
Hi,
You're the legal partner here. What does that mean? What's a legal partner?
I make sure that they don't run into any troubles here, but hopefully not. So hi, everyone. I'm a partner at a boutique Warsaw-based law firm specializing in venture capital transactions and tech advisory.
Cool, and a bit about myself. I'm the general partner of 500 Istanbul. We are a venture capital fund investing into Central Eastern Europe and Turkey. It's a 50 million euro vehicle, and we just did our first investment into Poland, actually doing our first investment, let me put it that way. Rafael is representing us. Hopefully we're going to finalize that over the week or so. It's fun, it's been fun. So today we're going to talk about the evolution of the venture capital landscape here in Poland, but also in the region. But I want to start off with Poland first. Rafael, I mean, you've been in this business for, I guess, more than a decade now, maybe 2 decades. Can you tell us a bit about the evolution of the venture capital landscape throughout the past 5-7 years?
Yeah, absolutely. So 7 years, it's a long period. I would say that 7 years ago, there were no real venture capital funds in Poland. They emerged a few years ago. I would say they're real ones. Obviously, there were some beginnings, and I think that we're still at the very beginning of the emerging of professional venture capital funds. Obviously, since a few years, a lot of effort has been made to support the establishment and emergence of these funds. There's a lot of public funding supporting that, so there are many different governmental or public money support in different programs. So that definitely helped building venture teams, venture partners, and investors, and boosted basically the ecosystem. And when we look at these statistics, year after year, we have records of deal volume and deal value in Poland. So I would say last 3 years have been crucial, and I would say also breakthrough.
And Natalia, what do you think? You're not based out here. Looking into Poland, do you see that the Polish ecosystem is booming? There's a lot of deal flow happening. Is that what it looks like from the outside as well?
It is, like if we are looking at CEE region in general, Poland stands out. So I think we should probably say Poland, it's one ecosystem, and then, other countries within CEE region, it's another ecosystem. So another element is Poland was classified, a few years ago as developed economy. It does help in terms of brand, so as we know, in general, private equity, including VC ecosystem, it started with US, then it moved to UK, and then it nicely moves to continental Europe, like France, Germany, and then obviously it goes to CEE. And for guys in private equity world, in venture capital world, in Western world, when Poland was moved officially to developed economy, that was a big thing. So answering your question, in a sum up, yes.
And can you give us some concrete examples into how this looks like when you look from the UK? Do you see more VCs reaching out to you, want to get introductions, hiring Polish people in the UK or locals here in Poland?
People reach out to me from all over the world, to be honest, like I'm London-based. Obviously, people know I'm from Ukraine. I think my accent is very Italian as well, that I'm Eastern European. If we have to single out, do they reach me out for Poland more than other CEE countries, or in general for CEE more than other regions? They do because of my past activities, which is I was investment banker, for CE region exclusively, and I covered Ukraine a lot. So kind of people know I'm well-networked, well-traveled, well-connected. So it's a lot of, word of mouth, referrals. So it's a very, informal network which reach out to me all the time, every day. Sometimes, I've been very rude. I just don't even acknowledge communication, because if I have to say thank you, I received, then I have to spend all my time just thinking.
Interesting. And just to compare Poland to Turkey, which is where I'm from, Turkey has seen immense venture capital back in 2010, 2012, but then given the geopolitical situation and the economic crisis that the country suffered from, the international appetite kind of got down, but local funds emerged. But between 2010 and 2019, the total amount of VC capital invested in Turkey has almost stood stable between $50 to $100 million. Didn't change a bit. But after 2019, it went skyrocketing. I mean, just to give you some perspective, Turkey failed to create a single unicorn in 10 years. We couldn't create one. And then over the past year and a half, we created 6 unicorns. Or the total amount of VC funding in Turkey was $1.5 billion last year, which is more than the previous 10 years combined. And Rafal, you alluded to something similar happening in Poland as well. Can you give me some figures in terms of number of deals, deal volume, number of unicorns created when you compare, for example, the past 2 years, let's call it the COVID-19 2 years, to the 10 years before that?
So the numbers are actually doubling when you look at that. So most recently we had some information about that the first quarter of this year actually doubled the first quarter of previous year, which was the record year in total for the volume and value of VC investments in Poland. So obviously the numbers are skyrocketing here as well, which is obviously a great trend. And when we look at the number of deals in last year, over 300, 400 deals made in Poland, the first quarter of 2022, over 200 deals. So we can see that on every kind of level, pre-seed, seed, Series A, also Series B in Poland, we are increasing the number and volume of the deals. When it comes to unicorns, obviously it's a big debate in Poland, because we have some unofficial information about few companies that reach that unicorn status, and we're talking about venture-backed and venture-built companies, and not like old economy unicorns, because I would basically disagree saying that companies that IPO 20 years ago are considered as unicorns.
Interesting. And while we were starting the fund back in 2016, we started to deploy into Turkey, and we increased our horizon to Eastern Europe. A big dilemma that we had was we were discussing whether Central Eastern Europe is a region or not. And what I'm trying to say is when you look into Middle East, for example, you see a lot of unicorns that start in Dubai, they become regional, they go to Saudi Arabia, Egypt, whatever, become a unicorn. Same with Southeast Asia. You would see companies that start in Malaysia, Indonesia, Singapore, expand into adjacent countries, become unicorns. Same with LATAM. But Central Eastern Europe was different. It's a lot of countries, very fragmented economies. None of them are deep enough almost to create local unicorns. So a lot of the unicorns that we see from this region were more companies that were looking more into the US. They have their technology offices back at home, but they build for more emerged markets, let's put it that way, either Western Europe, the UK, or the US. But I feel like this is slowly changing, and Central Eastern Europe is becoming more and more of a region as the cities and countries become more connected, economies become more connected, and we see a lot of companies that start in Poland, grow to Romania, become a Central Eastern European success story, even as staying as regional champions. Natalia, do you see it that way? Do you think Central Eastern Europe is a region? Can Central Eastern Europe have its own unicorns as companies that only focus into this region without ever touching the Western markets?
Yes, definitely. If we look at evolution, each country, each market within the CE region is developing. Like we've got, congrats to Poland who moved from developing to developed. Now we look at Czech Republic, we look at Croatia, we look at Romania. Ukraine after war will be fantastic. Market big, lots to do. So as a region, different parts create complementary contribution. One other element I would love to highlight about our region, compared to others, we can't ignore macro, we can't ignore geopolitics, because it matters and it directly influences speed, width, breadth of private equity, venture capital ecosystem. You know, war, of course, is a big concern from private equity point of view, right? Because it affects businesses, because there are losses, because, you know, no one wants to insure this type of businesses. So having aggressor, bordering, big aggressor, historic aggressor, bordering CE region is the factor on its own. What happened with our talent? Lots of people emigrate to US. They create companies there. They put on them badge of US, but essentially, in substance, they are Ukrainian, Belarusian, Russian. You know, again, talking about Russians, there are different Russians, you know. So maybe, as of now, at least, you know, correct me if I got it wrong, but I think probably Polish entrepreneurs stay more locally. Because, like, if I think about, you know, Ukrainian entrepreneurs, you know, country I covered very deeply for 8 years, essentially exclusively. You know, our entrepreneurs in tech space who want to create unicorns, they do emigrate to San Francisco, and we are losing also branding. Because I would love these guys to be in Ukraine and, you know, work for the brand of a country. It's important, you know, brand of a country not to be underestimated. And now I think, you know, collectively, you know, our region is very resilient as well. You know, it's again, we have to remember history, we have to remember how we ended where we are. Because, you know, we are a product of everything. It's economy, it's macroeconomy, geopolitics, it's psychology, it's entrepreneurial spirit. Polish people are very entrepreneurial.
Yeah, we had that trend once Poland joined the EU, and there was a big outflow of talent, you know, to Western economies, obviously. But now the trend is reversing. So basically, a lot of people are coming back. I know a lot of founders who are coming back from the Valley, from London, and establishing business in Poland. Obviously, they've learned that they need to go global and scale fast, and they're trying to establish companies that will be global, but they're starting to do it in Poland, hiring Poles and everyone who's working in Poland, because, you know, we expect that a lot of Ukrainian refugees will stay permanently in Poland, and that's already happening. We're already, I can give you examples from our work, daily work. We already started working with people who started establishing business in Ukraine, and they cannot obviously continue doing that, so they want to relocate to Poland, and if they succeed, they will probably stay here.
We need to develop a common brand, Poland, Ukraine. don't just, you know, they call them just Poland, because, you know, I am very, have to tell you, I have a mission to also help develop Ukraine brand. I'm very passionate about, but I thank you to Polish people.
You know which countries, they have a lot of entrepreneurs leave the country, yet they create a lot of the unicorns? Estonia and Israel.
Yes.
So those are two examples where they're not trying to have the entrepreneurs stay in their country. Actually, they want them to leave as long as the technology officers are also back at home. While we were starting the fund back in the day, the main discussion was, how come these smaller countries like Estonia, like Israel, create more unicorns than these mid-market countries like Spain or Italy or Poland or Turkey or Romania? By the way, which was the case, it's still the case. And we coined the term called population paradox, where after a certain size, as your population decreases, the number of unicorns actually start increasing. And piggybacking on that, our goal was, as a fund, was to invest into companies that only have global footprint, they only export technology outside the region, which is how we got our first 3 unicorns for the fund over the past 5 years from Turkey. But coming back to my initial question, Rafal, do you think these markets, CE markets and economies, are they getting more interconnected within the startup ecosystem? Do you see that happening?
I see that happening slowly, especially when I look on the investments that Polish funds are making abroad. Some of the funds that are backed by public money, they have certain regulations that they need to invest in companies that have the so-called Polish nexus. And that requirement, on one hand, is a hurdle, because obviously it makes it more difficult to directly invest into foreign companies abroad. But on the other hand, it forces to find companies that have this have this nexus or will create that nexus. So that will be interlinked because Polish funds are investing in Estonian or Lithuanian or Latvian companies that establish presence, offices, hire people in Poland, have R&D offices in Poland. So this creates, what you said, this interconnection between CE economies.
And what about international funds, international CEE funds looking in? Do you see funds coming from, I don't know, Czech Republic, Austria, Turkey, Bulgaria, etc., doing more deals here in Poland?
Absolutely. I think that's last 2 years have been, we've seen a tremendous number of deals in Poland with foreign investors. We started working more and more with foreign investors investing in Polish companies. Actually, last 12 months, we work more for foreign VCs and Polish VCs. This is a great trend because it shows that there's more faith in the region and in Polish founders and Polish companies. And also, it's a great sign that for Polish VCs to compete more.
True. Back when I was in Bay Area in 2015, 2016, people were saying that VC is a proximity business. There's a 40-mile radius. If you go to a Bay Area VC, they don't invest in Los Angeles. They don't invest in New York. They only do Bay Area investing. Proximity was that much important, but that completely changed over the past 3-4 years. Now you see funds investing all around the globe. And you said Ukraine a couple of times. I love Ukrainian talent. I did 3 investments in Ukraine over the past 4 years, one in Lviv, one in Kiev, and one in Odessa. And 2 of them are actually doing really, really well. First of all, do you do investments in Ukraine? Do you invest into startups in Ukraine?
I invest opportunistically around the globe, Ukraine including.
How many Ukrainian investments have you made?
3.
3. Nice.
Let's see, fingers crossed.
Yeah, and
Oh, I apologize. Yeah, sorry. So I will repeat my, question was how many, was I invested in Ukraine and how many I made. So I invested, yes, I made 3 investments, but overall my strategy is opportunistic globally. Just, again, given where I am based, what I did, what my ambition is, and, what is my network about, so which is very global.
And one problem about Ukraine was, like, while I was doing the investments, from a financing value chain perspective, it was much less connected to Europe. So after a company grows, if they want to raise Series A, B, C funding, if they're killing it, if they're great, obviously they can raise funding. I mean, if you're killing it, even if you're in Mars, you would raise funding. So that's not, there is enough funding for that. But if you're doing okay, because the local funds are not there, and international funds are not looking into Ukraine, UK funds, Europe funds, they're not looking into Ukraine, there was a kind of lack of funding, which was not similar to Poland, for example, like from a funding perspective. Why do you think that was?
Very obvious answer, if I may, and I'll try to be as brief as I can, but it's, it requires its own panel. So look, everything again interrelated. Historically, first and foremost, just let me provide you one insight in terms of how Ukrainian companies in general access foreign capital. Very often, they do access capital, but it's all done very confidentially. You wouldn't see it in any research, and this is also a requirement of companies who invest. I can give you an example without naming. One very prominent Western family office, who was from stage, and I'm sorry, I have just to be very honest with you now and share, since they probably I shouldn't share, but I will share. Was saying how bad Ukraine, how corrupted Ukraine, and you can't protect your investment and big risk of losing money. Never, ever, ever will invest in Ukraine. That's his public speech. And I know for a fact that he made 2 investments in Ukraine in agri sector. So after his panel was over, I just approached him and I said, what about investment A and Y? It's your money as far as I know. He went absolutely red-faced. But the point is, unfortunately, not everyone does business ethically. It worked for them. Why? Because A, If they say truthful information about Ukraine, then the assets will go up in price. They cannot, transact on their terms. Ukraine is a jewel, hidden jewel, covered in mud, as I call it now, right? It's like if you think about agro sector, if you look about tech, it's absolutely, top, globally. But again, this is sort of branding. I spoke, for example, to our guys in parliament. I said, guys, we have to do something about branding of Ukraine. Ukraine has absolutely bad branding. And that conversation was around a year ago. So branding, everything starts with branding. The perception matter. If people think you are bad, or you are high risk, or you are very corrupted, or, it's risky to invest, it will be reflected in price. There is lots of games, lots of tactics. Why it happened again? We have to go into history. We don't have time. But look, war will absolutely change tide. The silver lining of war is people saw Ukraine, people saw Ukrainians in a very positive light. Yes, it's a high price, but we have what we have. We can't deny war is happening, and as I said, we have to be proactive, positive, and make commercial sense out of it and develop Ukraine. It's our time now, But you are right in terms of many didn't look, but formally didn't look. Ukrainian businesses did raise money. For example, in London, there is an office which I know works totally incognito. They have 15 people team who invest exclusively in Ukraine for 30 years. But again, it's because of network and informal conversations you get to those insights.
What's the root cause of that? Why is that happening? Does it have to do with history, wars, Russia? Why?
Long history, First started when Soviet Union collapsed. Poland and Ukraine were on the same par in terms of GDP per capita, right? Very pleased for Poland. You didn't have, you have not been part of Soviet Union. But having Russia with its size, with its tactics, which is brutal by definition, they always kept an eye on Ukraine. There was, as I call it, fifth column who was working on, saying Ukraine is bad everywhere. They paid, they exported corruption, and they created very bad image of country in political circles, in big business circles. There were incentives given to Western players not to transact with Ukraine. Intention was to weaken Ukraine to the point that country can be reintegrated into Soviet Union. So we'll create Soviet Union 2.0. When I said these things before, people said, come on. No, you are just too negative. You are anti-Russia. I said, look, I loved Russia, don't take me wrong. But I'm speaking as things are. They have agenda, they are very tactical, it matters. If you have a neighbor who always badmouths you, it's bad. Because you can't use your energy to work on positive things. And again, I don't want to go into blaming. Of course there was corruption also, but look, we had politicians who were working on agenda to do everything possible to reintegrate Ukraine into Soviet Union because of personal interest. It's a very, very long story. It's not probably even details for this panel.
Thanks a lot.
There is definitely reason for that.
Thanks. I'll divert back to international funds in the region and ask Rafal about stuff from a legal perspective. You see funds coming from Central Eastern Europe, Western Europe, the UK, doing deals in Poland. Are they doing deals into Polish entities mostly, or do they want the companies to flip up and become international entities?
So CE funds, they kind of understand the legal background and regulatory background in Poland. So they're not afraid of investing directly into Polish entities, Polish structures. However, when we look at US investments into Polish companies, they're already made into flipped companies to the States. US investors are really reluctant to invest directly in foreign entities. It's not only about Poland, it's their general approach. although I must say that we had examples of great Polish companies that had top investors, it's been below the radar, so not really marketed, but for example, Salesforce Ventures invested in a Polish company from Krakow.
Which one?
Polsource.
Okay.
It's public, so it's nothing that I'm disclosing. So they invested directly into Polish joint stock company, and nobody really wrote about it. But the company was great. I mean, now they exited a year ago. There are cases like that. But when you look at companies like Dog Planner, when you look at Booksy, when you look at top Polish companies, the next rounds, Series B, Series C, and beyond, are made into US kind of or UK entities. However, there are also other cases of Polish companies that have great investors. They did Series B, Series C, and they have Polish structures. But obviously, when we compare, we have a broad spectrum of investments that we advise. So we know all the structures in the States, in the UK, in Germany. And obviously, Polish legal structure is not too investors friendly, I would say. There are a lot of formalities, a lot of things need to be made in writing or notarial form, which especially now in post-COVID times, people are not traveling that much, so we need more flexibility. And
Putting those apart, putting apart the paperwork, writing requirement, and things like that apart, from a structural perspective, what are the cons of having a Polish entity?
I mean, I wouldn't say there are like many cons, but I wouldn't say that there are many pros as well. I mean, formalities, that's one thing. When we talking more specifically, in Poland, we don't have very well established or well regulated ESOP schemes for Polish, for example, limited liability companies. They're not well kind of defined from a tax perspective. They're not effective from kind of legal setup perspective. So it makes, and limited liability company is the most popular, the cheapest form for Polish startups to establish. So they always struggle, and ESOP nowadays is something essential for every investor and for every company. So this is just one of the examples. So I think obviously a lot must be made on a regulatory level and legislative level to make it easier and more flexible. So I would say that's one thing that comes to my mind.
And Natalia, international funds coming into the region, they're doing deals here. As a local fund, how would you defend yourself? What's your advantage compared to an international fund, say from London, doing deals in Poland?
Knowledge, local knowledge, intimate knowledge, being one of people. You know, every ecosystem have their own way of doing deals, communicating, transacting. You know, when you're one of local people, you absolutely act, you know, as part, right? You are part. Then another thing, confidence. Like I can't tell you how many times when I was capital raising in my previous career, Western funds, big names, try to kick out of me confidence. Because confidence is asset. If you're confident, and if you are a good networker, and you are insightful, strategic, and you know, logical and patient, and can read through their tactics, you are not the best capital raiser for them because you are expensive. You know, so my kind of advice, suggestion will be, no matter what, do your homework, know your product, understand how you stand in a market compared to your potential competitors anywhere in the world. Be very well aware. When you come to a meeting, be, you know, like reserved, very calm, and talk as equal from first word. They may not like you, but they will respect you. Will be second meeting, third meeting. If they want a deal, they will be coming after you, but deal will be on right terms. Without, again, I don't want to offend anyone, but I think value of discussion is to be authentic, and I share with you my personal experience. I've seen it all the time. When our brain, our insights, our talent, our connections somehow were discounted just because business in Eastern Europe, you are from Eastern Europe, you have non-Western accent, thank you.
That's a compliment, no? Like when you're in London, not having a British accent is a compliment.
Depends to whom you talk.
To me,
Well, I took it as a compliment, you know what? I just thought whatever. You know, many people in this world, everyone has their own opinion. No, it didn't keep me awake in the night, you know?
it's good to hear. And Rafał, international funds coming in, hiring Polish people either in Poland or in London. Do you think local funds still have an access advantage? Is the access asymmetry still there?
I would say yes, still, but I wouldn't say they're losing it, but international funds are more present here, so Polish funds have to be more and more competitive to fight for the best companies, basically, because people tend to say in Poland that there's more capital than great companies, and I think it's everywhere in the world, a situation like that. There's a lot of dry powder everywhere, so there's a lot of competition, and we can see that a lot of Polish funds are co-investing with foreign investors. That gives them a lot of confidence. If an outside, I would say, investor perceives Polish company as attractive, then they're getting more confidence to co-invest, which would probably not happen if that foreign investor didn't invest for different reasons. So I can also see cases like that. Will not disclose that, but there are cases like that. So, but obviously, as we can see here, the conferences like that are in Poland, but they're multinational, they're regional. So there are a lot of startups from all over the world, actually all over the region. There are many investors coming in from different locations, not only from CE, but also from the UK, from Germany. There are many German funds actually that invested directly in Polish companies, great companies. These companies are raising further rounds. So I think it's becoming more and more competitive. And obviously, I was afraid when the war started that a lot of foreign investors will lose confidence for some time in Poland, but I don't see that happening, which is great. Obviously, there are many Polish funds that need to invest in Polish companies, so I wouldn't expect any dramatic slowdown, and I don't see any slowdown in foreign investors, which is actually great. And you know, you're the greatest example, you know, right now investing in a Polish company, so. It's good.
Nice, great to hear that. I actually want to double down in Ukraine as well. Like one of the things that I have in mind, and Ukraine has been the, so we did most of our investments in Turkey. Ukraine was second. Then came Bulgaria, Greece, Hungary, etc. back in Fund 1. And we wanted to do more in Ukraine. We hired someone in Lviv to be able to do more investments. So I think post-war, or however it transitions out, we're going to start doubling down in Ukraine as well. Well, international funds are not just bringing capital, they're also bringing A, impact, and B, ESG policies also. Yeah. As other funds start to invest into local funds as well. Do you see impact-driven, do you see funds, local funds, being more impact-driven thanks to the investors coming from abroad, or do you see local funds having own ESG policies, SDG goals, reporting on those on a quarterly, semi-annually, annually basis, whatever happening in the region?
I would say it depends on. You know, some Western funds, you know, can also lend from CE, local funds in terms of what it, of course. Look, it's about, again, my notion, my message is from, you know, I interviewed in my career around 800 investors for my own project. You know, I would just travel 35 countries. You know, I was very curious to understand how their mind works a long time ago, but I took a very good lesson from those years. It served me super well. You know, talent doesn't have nationality. Ideas don't have nationality. You know, it's like we learn from each other. I learn from you, you learn from me. You know, the same here. It's like I don't believe in this West-East thing at all. It just, you know, it's a thing that you choose individually as a market player. Do you want to give it attention or no? I choose not to give it. If I see someone, for example, who try to behave like I always have to learn from them. Look, if it makes sense, I learn. I'm very open, but I'm very as much as I take, as much I give, and I'm open and direct about it. They learn from us too. Absolutely, there is no such thing as a going to come here and be a teacher and you are a student. Wisdom, intelligence, talent, insight, grasp, business acumen, entrepreneurship, you know what? We have it at least as much as Western players do. But where region in general, where I see times and again commonality, there is a way to communicate. When, for example, US fund arrives to see region, they have a way to communicate. They start with confidence. They start with, their terms. And quite often, they could be terms like you either take it or you leave it. Could be very often, And I think it's in our power to respond to such approaches in a way that benefit us. We are our own advocates. And as I said, they learn from us, we learn from them. It's sharing. World is a small place. There is no such thing anymore, in my view, as developed economy and developing economy. It depends what industry you talk about. After COVID, everyone is redeveloping, if anything. World is interconnected. With technology, make place tiny place. Previous week I was in Singapore, right? And then this week I'm in Poland. And I was thinking I flew 60% of a land already. Land is just so tiny. There is no anymore lack of information. We don't have any more Berlin Wall. We don't have any more Soviet Union, It's all in your power. And just build your network of Westerners who are nice, who are, productive, with whom you want to work. Just create synergies. That's my attitude.
And before we close, Rafal, one last sentence from you. What do you think we can do better to highlight the potential of the region? I was going to ask it to you, Natalia, as well, but I think you already gave an answer to that, so I'll just ask Rafal.
I mean, absolutely, fully agree that we should be more confident and proud and build branding, because this is something we're actually still lacking. We're on the right track to build a CE brand, I think in general regional brand, and we need to share more success stories, because these success stories will follow on with other success stories, and more money and more investors, more confidence in the region that we can actually create great companies, have great founders, because they're here, they're there. As I said, they came from the UK, the US, brought knowledge and bringing expertise and building great companies. So we just need to brand it properly, and I think this is something we're still lacking. And that should definitely change, and we should put a lot of focus on that.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for joining. Thanks a lot for staying. It's late now, but thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.